Welcome back to the program. Liberia's political future hangs in a balance as the country's Supreme Court says the presidential runoff cannot be held until the Electoral Commission urgently and expeditiously investigates allegations of irregularities and fraud made by the opposition Liberty Party. Chief Justice Francis Sai-Korkwo handed down the judgment to a packed courtroom in the capital, Monrovia. They said the Election Commission had wrongly and illegally proceeded to organize a runoff between the former football star George Weah and Vice President Joseph Boakai without dealing with the complaint of the Liberty Party. Its candidate, Charles Brumskin, was eliminated from the runoff after he came third in last month's election. The runoff was called after Mr. Weah, who secured the highest number of votes, failed to secure an outright majority. The court's decision came as good news to Liberty Party officials, including its chairman, Benjamin Sanve, and its vice presidential candidate, Harrison Kanwea, as they left the courtroom elated. Today is the start of the Climate Change Summit holding in Fiji for the first time. Governments from around the world are expected to try to bolster a 2015 pact to combat climate change, despite U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to pull out the United States from the agreement and instead promote U.S. coal and oil industries. President Trump doubts that human activities are the main cause of climate change and said back in June that he will quit the Paris Pact. Fiji's Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama, who's presiding over the meetings with almost 200 nations in Bonn, says he wants more urgent action to cut greenhouse gases as part of the Paris Agreement. Now let's go live to Christopher Stargate of the Dutch Welle for more on the meetings. It's good to have you, Christopher. What are the key issues being discussed at this year's Climate Summit?
Yeah, here's Sang Nadine live for Deutsche Welle. And this is a working summit. The Paris Agreement was decided in 2015, 2 years ago. It was hailed as a major breakthrough for all the countries to come together and create a framework for limiting the global warming temperature rise to maximum 2 degrees Celsius. And what's happening at this conference is they're hammering out the details on the rule book. So there was a great analogy I just heard about brand new iPhone or a great new smartphone that still needs an operating system. So this is the operating system that they're just getting the last details together for.
Apologies, sorry, Ben, for getting your name mixed up there. But why is the summit taking place in Bonn and being hosted by Fiji?
Yeah, well, it's taking place in Bonn. Germany is the technical host, but the actual holder of the presidency is Fiji. And Fiji was selected as one of the countries most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Its existence is literally threatened by sea level rise as a result of human-caused global warming. However, Fiji is not a country with a whole huge amount of infrastructure. So Germany offered to act as host and provide the infrastructure. There was 117 million euros invested in sponsoring the conference here on the part of the German government, but Fiji is actually the president of the event.
Now, just before I let you go, Sonia, tell us how important are the meetings for Africa?
Oh, I think the meetings and the climate conference framework and the decisions that come out are very important for Africa. Africa has some of the most vulnerable regions, and we've seen this year these extreme weather, the droughts that have racked various regions of on the African continent, and there's ranging from extreme weather that affects crops and harvests to water shortages. So these issues will only come into play more as climate change continues. And so African countries are very engaged in this process as well of hammering out these rule books and getting the world on the right track to limit global warming.
Well, thanks again, DW correspondent Sonia Ben, for those updates. According to a report by the government, the United Nations and a humanitarian group, civil war in South Sudan has made the hunger crisis much worse, despite this being the harvest season. Almost 5 million people, close to half of the country's population, are classified as severely food insecure, an increase of more than 1 million people on the same period last year. Hyperinflation has caused food prices to soar as fighting across South Sudan has brought instability and economic crisis. More than 1 million children are expected to be malnourished next year, and the UN says that in the worst-case scenario, there could be famine in several areas. And Ugandan doctors have begun an indefinite strike at all government facilities despite a reported threat to jail striking medics. The country's doctors are protesting poor pay, a lack of medical equipment, and what they say are the arbitrary arrest of their colleagues accused of corruption. Uganda's Prime Minister met with organizers to urge them to call off the strike whilst the government looked into their demands. His request, however, was shut down with boos. Last week, President Yoweri Museveni said he would call a state of emergency should the strike go ahead. In the meantime, Uganda's Triplets, Ghetto Kids became famous after being featured on local artist Eddie Kenzo's Last video. But it was French Montana's Unforgettable that thrust this group of young dancers onto the world stage from the BET Awards to Vibe magazine. Growing up in a poor area of Kampala, they talk about how music never really meant fame to them, but a chance to do what they loved and were good at.
I got a hard head, but her ass up. She want the last name with the ring on it.
Even before Ugandan dance group Triplets, Ghetto Kids became the stars of a hit video by Moroccan-American rapper French Montana, dance had begun to change their lives. French's video was shot in Kampala, a location he chose after seeing the kids on YouTube and decided to have them dance for his video. The journey began when founder of the dance troupe, 31-year-old Dauda Kavuma, started an initiative to help underprivileged children engage in something positive and stay off the streets. TGK first found local and regional fame when they featured in Ugandan artist Eddie Kenzo's music videos. So far, their videos have over 10 million views. They've since been on the cover of Vibe magazine, performed on stage at the 2017 BET Awards in Los Angeles, and on The Tonight Show with U.S. talk show host Jimmy Fallon.
I felt so good because, first of all, we were the first African dancers to perform on that stage. Yeah? You know, so I felt so good, and I felt so good to perform for big people like Mayweather. You know, Mayweather was sitting in the audience, and I was very happy to see us, the African kids, performing on that stage. I was very happy, and after performing, he came backstage to thank us. Yeah? He gave us some hugs, some money, dollars, you know.
Me, myself, I cried. I was not believing it. I felt that I am dreaming, but I kneeled on my knees and I prayed to God, and I told him, thank you, God. Because some time back, some few years ago, I was looking at those stages and on TV. I used to admire them, but God made it possible. Now it's me who was performing on the BET.
The dance group is made up of 9 children, aged between 5 and 16 years old, but Kavuma cares for up to 25 kids in total.
Nice one there. And that's it on our program today. Thank you for watching. I am Bisi Adebayo.